empty as could be, and now I'm staring at my face above a bathroom.
Good morning, family friends. Amber here. I thought I would take a few minutes and just kind of go through what's in my brain and how I approach the gardening season. I thank you so much for tuning in. I am definitely coming to you very much as a student of the gardening space. I am not a veteran gardener. I don't draw from many decades of gardening experience like some of the mentors that I like to follow. But I have been doing this. This will be my fourth year, coming into my fourth season in the garden, and I've learned a thing or two. So I thought I would just share some of those things with you. So I've got my little binder here. This is kind of my gardening stuff and my gardening journal that I've been keeping since year one. Wanted to share some of the things that are in it. One of the things that I did when I was very first starting into this space of gardening and learning how to grow food specifically was to learn how to grow food. So when I think of gardening, I've done gardens with flowers and things like that in the past, but not overly successful. But definitely was my very first experience of growing a piece of food back in 2020, as many of you as well. So as a first-time gardener in that season, it has just exploded, and there's such a plethora of information, and we live in a digital age where we can have anything at our fingertips, and that's kind of what I did. Is I really just felt like I became this student hoarding all of the information and content that I could. I soon became very overwhelmed with everything that was available in the shoulds and the very black and white, not doing things right. So I ended up falling into a bit of an analysis paralysis, if you will. I just became over consumed with stuff, and I felt myself invest so much time and effort into planting or sowing my seeds, getting my seed starts going, and then planting them and then losing them. There was just too much time and effort and money, quite frankly, spent on potentially not doing it right. So what I found myself doing was just backing away from all of it in year two, because year one I did seem to have a pretty decent year. However, looking back in my journal and all of my entries, I noticed that I had lost all of my seed starts. I've done it every year from 2020, 2021, and 2022. All three of those years I spent hours planting my seed starts. And the first year I planted them and I lost them to a late frost. Everything that I had hardened off and done all of the things that I was supposed to do. So by all rights, I was safe according to the frost calendars and charts that I kind of follow, and I ended up losing them. So I ended up going to the store, getting a few extra starts just to make sure that I did have something growing in the garden. I took a gardening course from a vetted source that I really truly trust, and learned the black and white of gardening is not so important. It's not as important as just getting out there and throwing seeds in the ground and just kind of watching what Mother Nature can do, because she's a marvelous creature and she can make things grow and she can make things die. So at the end of the day, I did all I could and all of the knowledge that I had learned and gathered, and lost all of my seed starts anyway. So this year, coming into my 2023 gardening season, I've decided to not really do a lot of seed starts. I'm going to do a lot more direct sowing. And what that means is essentially I'm not taking the seeds and starting them inside in a more climatized space. I'm going to go ahead and just direct sow what I can in the garden space and hope that helps give me a good bountiful year. The reason I'm choosing to do that is because every year puts so much time and effort into growing my seed starts, and then every year I've lost them. Last year I lost them to pest pressure. The year before that I lost the majority of them to climate, because it was so moist and there's so much. I got powdery mildew on all of my stuff. So yeah, I've been challenged in ways that would make, I think, a lot of gardeners kind of throw in the towel. But then I've had the odd success, then that's what keeps me coming back. I'm going to show you some of my garden from the previous years of my gardening journey throughout this video, so hopefully it keeps it interesting and you're not just kind of focused on me. I think the number one thing that I had to learn in my second year of gardening was, in this course that I had taken, is my why. why am I gardening and why am I growing food and why do I have a desire to learn this stuff? I think it's still being redefined every year. Every year my gardening reason why has changed. 2020, my reason why was very obvious for the same reason that a lot of gardeners started. I felt a very big calling on my heart to learn how to grow food for my family, learn how to preserve food for my family, and just kind of learn how to consume the world and consume our earth a little differently than I had been. And so that was kind of my reason why in 2020, recognizing, bare food shelves for the first time in my lifetime. And it kind of scared me. And I decided that I had the garden space to do it, and I felt like it was being not used in the way that it should or it deserved to be. So I cleaned it all up. I did a no-till method, and I do believe that is likely how I'm going to continue doing, and I've established these garden spaces. I learned a lot about no-till gardening and the lasagna method and the layering method as far as trying to create a good solid soil base.
Sorry, I was interrupting
you. You interrupted my flow.
Sorry.
I can't. Welcome back to another Family Life video. Interruptions, family life. What can I say? Anyways, I'm going to get back to this. I just had a little interruption, lunch interruption. Somebody came in, made lunch, carried on. So gave me time to get a fresh coffee. My why. So yeah, gardening as a hobby, and anything really as a hobby, is nice to discover your why and what it is that you're trying to establish in the garden. Is it for food, for the sustainability, reducing the pesticides, organic gardening, abundant gardening, markets to resell? You have to determine what it is that you are interested in doing and why you're gardening. And for me, like I said, initially was 2020 was a very different reason than what 2023 going into this gardening season is. I have discovered a few things about myself as a gardener, and the first thing that I've discovered is it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work. I am kind of embarrassed to say I've had a desk job my entire life, and that is a cakewalk compared to what homesteading and gardening and all of this kind of stuff here on the country property. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work, and I had to determine what I was capable of giving it and the attention that it needed and all of the stuff. I don't have a strong watering source up at my garden space, and I realized trucking water up and down the hill to the space was a lot of work. So Frank had hooked me up with a small thing of water that I'm able to fill up, which was huge. I got that in my second year. However, it is just on a feed system, so there's not a lot of pressure. And so we tried to hook up a pump system to it to allow me to water with the hose. And unfortunately, it trickles out so slowly. So it was frustrating me, the idea of being able to water. So I had to create a solution for my watering, and that was the wood chip mulch. So I learned a lot about wood chip mulching. I learned a lot about no-till gardening. My current garden going into the 2023 season was established with a cardboard base over top of the grass that was there. That was a heavily neglected garden space. And then I put on top of it really good compost that I purchased from a local nursery, and had it trucked in, and I had an entire dump load for that season. So that first season, the yield as far as what I invested in the cost to the garden, I'm sure I lost money by the time I had bought the soil and bought all of the seeds and all of that stuff. But that being said, now that I'm going into my third year, the soil base is really quite nice. It's established. And I think I'm hoping that it's going to give me a good gardening season. The concern that I have is that the wood chips and the girls has scratched in a lot of the mulch, a lot of the wood chip mulch into the soil, and I was concerned that maybe I've lost a lot of nitrogen. So, but again, it's not something I'm going to know until later into the season. I'm going to try to fertilize with a high nitrogen, I'm going to fertilize with a high nitrogen fertilizer and hope that I get a good yield. And what I learned in my fertilizer And the simplest way for my brain to remember it, there's three numbers on your fertilizer. The first one is up, the second one is down, and the third one is all around. So if you're looking for up vegetation, you want a high number there. If you want a good root system and good flowering system, then you want a high middle number. And then that's your strong roots. And then your third one, it's kind of an all around type of thing. So up, down, all around is kind of the way that I think of the fertilizing. So if you have a really high first number, you're going to get high nitrogen, and your second number I think is phosphorus, and your third number is potassium, possibly. Again, new gardener, student, I'm learning. Don't hold me to it. So this is not, like I said, I'm still very much a student and learning what I can. Sorry, my dog is a little bit sad and he wants to get out of his cage because he's soaked. He just jumped in the pond. So he's not allowed to run around yet until he dries off. They're huskies. They're going to start talking to one another now. Lay down. You're not going out. It's the funny farm. This, like I said, this is my gardening book. Oh, here, I got notes. Up, down, all around. Here we go. The NPK. This is my notes. This is my book my vetted gardening sources, my soil amendments. NPK. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. I can't. He's soaked. I don't want him out. Huskies don't bark. They talk. Thor? They're social beasts, those little pups. How do you do a vlog when you've got all of these people and all of these distractions? It's life. It's real, and it's always pulling at you in different directions. But I put a couple of the whys of my garden for the 2021 is I wanted to harvest and prove to myself that I was capable of doing hard things. And gardening has probably been the hardest thing that I've ever done. Help restore Mother Earth, and help teach my family how to feed their families. I lived in this ignorant space of recognizing that I would always have a resource, a grocery store to be able to get my food from. And it wasn't until I started growing my own food that I recognized what an actual carrot is supposed to taste like, what a cucumber is actually supposed to taste like. Because I've never really done farmers market shopping, and I've never really done a bunch of that kind of stuff prior to this. So by growing my own food, I was really pleasantly surprised at how tasty, homegrown, naturally organic type of stuff, it had a very different taste. I wanted to learn how to use my property to grow and be sustainable, and I wanted to reduce the chemicals and the preservatives that are found in the food on the grocery store shelves. And I just wanted to learn a new skill. It's important that we constantly are challenging ourselves and doing hard things. And this challenge, moving to the country, this has probably been the biggest challenge in my life. It's very different, but I love it. Very rewarding. So when it comes to the frost classification of your plants and what it is that you're choosing to plant, you've got perennials and then you've got your annuals, right? So you've got some plants that will come back year after year after year, which is called your perennial. And then you've got your annuals, which you plant every single year. And a lot of herbs and things like that will fall into the annual category, things like asparagus, those kind of things. Those are things that will establish a nice root bed and will come back year over year over year. So when you're planning your garden space, it's important that you kind of plan those zones and those regions to know that those things will come back every year. But with regards to the actual planning worksheets, what I learned very early on is I live in what they refer to as Zone 5B here in Central Ontario. Okay, so every time you buy a garden seed plant, one of the things that on the back of the seed packages, I don't know if you can, if it says here, it's got right here, 100 days. What you want to do, in like I said, in my region here in Ontario, Central 5B, there's a lot of packages that, or a lot of seeds that will tell you based on their zones and on the regions. What the zoning does is it just kind of gives you the average first frost and last frost dates and gives you kind of an idea of your planting season. So for me, and all you do is literally go into Google and just search for your area and say last frost date, and then what the expected last frost date is. Mine here is May the 28th. So when I start to plan my garden, I plan the 8 weeks. So for example, this package of jalapeno peppers, this package here says here to start indoors 8 weeks before your last frost, and showing this the depths, and it kind of gives you a bit of an idea of the growing season that you have. So there's a lot of information on the back of the seed packs, and that information is to the most part pretty accurate, and it shows you how to plant the seeds and things like that. But all I like to do is literally take, say I wanted to plant a tomato and I just don't know when I need to be starting my seeds, whether or not I can direct sow them, and or if they have to be seed started. Direct sowing is just taking the seed and putting it in the soil in the garden bed where it stays, and there's less disturbing of the root bed and things like that. The problem with direct sowing is things like this that require 100 days to germinate or 100 days to fruit. It's giving the season a head start. The problem is I don't have my entire gardening season, which I looked on, just the Farmer's Almanac. So I typed in my region, and then I realized that my first frost is May 28th, and my first frost is September 21st, and my last frost is May the 28th. So I discovered that through the thing, and then it gives me a 115-day growing season. Well, these winter squash need 100 days. So I need to make sure that those are, in order for them to be fully mature by the time the first frost comes, I need these to be hardened off, and or else the harvest itself is a waste. So you kind of do, that's the best practices that I've learned is well, there isn't really a black and white, and some gardeners will say that there is a very black and white way to do it. I like to learn how to do things based on my experience, and my experience, I had a bountiful first year of winter squash, spaghetti squash. It was very, very good. I harvested several of them when they were still green, and they weren't quite ready to be harvested because I was getting a frost and I was worried that I was going to lose them. But I learned in my second year that you can keep them on the plant a little bit. What will happen is the frost will likely kill back the leaves, but it won't kill the fruit. So you can still kind of let them harden off a little bit and get a little bit more yellow versus taking them off the plant prematurely and letting them ripen up off that, because they're not as good. I'm not going to get into the diseases and all of the different pest pressures and things like that. There's going to be time for all of that, but there was a lot, and I incurred a lot of that problems with the garden in the deficiencies and in the identifying the problems and looking for the solutions to that. There's just such a, like I said, a plethora of information on the internet. I want to create a beautiful place that I find that I love to work in, that I love to find refuge in, and to find a place of just peace. I do love to have a set of wind chimes just to kind of hear that, but some people don't like that sound. So it kind of has to be your desires and what it is that you like to do. Don't put a set of wind chimes in your garden space just because somebody else did and you don't really like the sound of them. So don't grow tomatoes if you don't like tomatoes. Don't grow cauliflower if you're not interested in eating it. I had my second year that I was growing food. I recognized I did really good. I got some really good, nice heads of cauliflower. I was so excited that I harvested about 6 or 7 of them, brought them in and to process them and cook them up, and they were filled with earwigs. And I had no idea. They looked beautiful on the outside. It wasn't until I cut into them, and it would just totally gross me out. I was so mad that I had spent so much time trying to create or trying to grow this vegetable, and then I went to the grocery store that afternoon, and there on the shelf, this beautiful white cauliflower that just looked great for $1.99. And I was just like, so you know what? Now that I know I can grow a cauliflower, I will likely know I can do it. But from now on, I likely won't grow them, because if I can grow it, get it at the grocery store. Is it organic? Do I know that it's not filled with pesticides, things like that? Maybe. I'm not sure. That's kind of the trade-off, that I have to make a decision whether or not I want that, or if I want to go through the disappointment. And the gardening can be a disappointing space, especially when you invest so much time and effort in it and you lose the stuff. So there are some varieties that really I think everything can be direct sowed outside, as long as you have a warm enough soil that can germinate the seed. So if you were to Google, how or when should I plant tomato seeds, or when should I plant beets, and it'll give you based on your first and last frost date. So based on that area versus your regions and things like that, just go in and check. You know what? Tomatoes should be started inside and transplanted outside. I noticed that I had a really hard time with my starts, so I ended up buying a lot of starts for my tomatoes, my Romas, and my beefsteaks, because those are pretty utilitarian for the fact of making sauces and marinaras and spaghetti sauce, things like that. And I make that because although I don't love a tomato, eat it like just on a sandwich, I will grow tomatoes because I love to make those sauces. I grew all of the stuff for my spaghetti sauce, the basil, the oregano, the onions, the garlic, all the stuff that went into making that marinara. I grew everything. And so there was a satisfaction that I loved to do that. But then, of course, through the winter months, because I didn't put up enough to last the entire year, I was able to go to Costco and buy 2 1-liter jars of a really good marinara sauce, organic, for like $12.99. But some of the plants that love to get direct sown are, so taking your seed and planting it straight into the garden, into the soil. Green beans, dried beans, carrots, beets, turnips, radishes, spinach, squashes, winter or summer, melons, zinnias, sunflowers, marigolds, cucumbers, and rutabagas. So they don't really like their roots being messed with much, so they prefer to be direct sown. Starting indoors to like elongate the season. And the reason that you want to elongate your season is because once the temperatures get to be, the mid of summer and they're too hot, a lot of those seeds will just, once they've germinated in the soil and they've got to a point where they're starting to bear fruit, and if the temperatures get way too hot, they'll just bolt and go to seed. And that's a risk I've got to take. So I know that I might lose the opportunity to harvest, to have a good harvest. But in the process, I didn't want to overwhelm myself too much this year in the garden. So I'm going to create a beautiful space. I'm going to do flowers. I'm going to do some vegetables I know the kids will love and eat, and create a beautiful, pretty space. So what I did was I just took my calendar, and so I've got my book, and I've got my little calendar book here. And what I did was, when I found a variety that I wanted to plant and I looked at the details of when it needed to be sown indoors or out, I counted back from my first frost date, how long it needed to go, and then I started the seeds then. And then I started keeping a journal of when those needed to go in, and I would put them on my calendar when I needed to start them. So for example, I've got here my kale. Because the seeds of a kale plant and of a lettuce plant are extremely tiny, so they should be started. Or else if you direct sow, which you can do, and I'm going to this year, they have a tendency to just wash away. That's why carrots are so hard to grow, because the seed is so tiny, tiny, tiny. But things like sunflowers, they have a bigger seed, and squash, they have a bigger seed. Peas, they won't get washed away as easily, so they are good to be direct sown. But things like lettuce and kale, I'm taking a risk by direct sowing it, because they might just get washed away. Who knows? We've been having like 4 or 5 days of rain straight, And now it's beautiful sunny day, so I'm gonna get out in the garden in a minute, guys, as soon as we're done this video, to plant some of my seeds, because tomorrow is supposed to, and it's sunny today, they get washed away, I guess I start over. So you've got your frost classes, which is your frost hardy, semi hardy, and tender. So when you look at something that says it's a frost tender plant, it means that if you do get a frost, it will likely kill that plant. Nightshades, things like peppers and tomatoes and things like that, those are pretty frost tender. Basil's pretty frost tender. Those type of things, if you plant them too soon, they could possibly die because they don't tolerate the frost at all. Okay, so some of the things that I'm going to get started planting today are my frost hardy varieties, because we are still very early in May and the potential for a frost is very likely. So I'm going to go ahead and do some direct sowing of some beets, some carrots, some dill, some kale and lettuce, even though you know, I'm risking them the seeds going away, but the root veg, things like that can handle some of the colder temps. In the event that it does, I'm going to do some peas and get started on my winter squashes too. So I'm going to start those plants now, and I am going to go ahead and start my jalapeno peppers inside. Even though I should have started them maybe 4 weeks ago, I'm still going to go ahead and do them now, only because I do want to get some harvest for the cowboy candy this year. I didn't get any jalapenos last year, and I think it's because I planted them too late in the season. And so the peppers, I think they got stunted. I think they got cold. And again, it's just, you know what, guys, it's a temperamental thing. And sometimes you have successes and sometimes you have failures. I've had a lot of failures and I've grown a lot from my failures, but it hasn't stopped me from getting back in the garden. So what I did for my seeds, I did this, I just got it at Michael's here in Canada. That's our craft store. And each one of these things has a little packet. And so I did my little label maker and kind of organized my seeds this way and just throw all of my seeds, and I became a bit of a seed junkie. And I think that that's what ends up happening is I was watching all this content of trying to create a garden that was very much like theirs, and I got overwhelmed with seeds, and I wanted to do all the things. I wanted to do all the things they were doing. And then I realized very soon some of the things that just weren't going to work in my region and or in my family. And you know, we did a lot of squashes, summer squash, things like that. And I had zucchinis coming out my everywhere. Zucchinis were everywhere. And I didn't love the taste of them. I didn't love the zucchini. So I found myself growing this thing and not really even enjoying it. So I've just decided that I'm going to only grow things that we love, and that's kind of where I'm at. So butternut squashes I love. I've got a few still from last year actually. And I want to do some peas. So this is the purple kale that I'm going to go ahead and plant today. This is another kale that I'm going to do. So I'm going to do 3 of the kales here that I want. And this is just a green curled kale. Go ahead and do a couple of peas. I want to do some peas on that beautiful trellis that I have. I do have some beans, but those I'm going to do later. But these sugar pod peas, like the cold, they're frost hardy. So I'm going to go ahead and do those. I did have garlic and onions in the garden, and unfortunately I left the chickens in there too long, and I think they scratched all of them up. So I'm going to try and replant those and see if they come back. This is my cilantro. Oh, I want to plant some arugula as well. This is the arugula likes the cool weather as well, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And some lettuces. Look at all the seeds I bought. These seeds have to be all organized. Got to do some organizing. Get all these seeds into these little containers. Look at all the fun stuff here. I want to do some nasturtium. But anyways, guys, I'm going to finish doing this. We're going to wrap this video up. Thanks so much for hanging out. And I know I was all over the place on this vlog, but I was just trying to share my first 3 years of being in the garden and recognizing some of the things that I learned. So get out there. Enjoy the garden the way you want to enjoy the garden. get out there. You can certainly follow along with some of the best practices that are available so that you have the best gardening season you can, but don't get so overwhelmed that you don't do anything. Even a little bit of food versus no food, or a little bit of beauty in the garden. So let's get outside, bring you along to do some planting of these seeds, and then, you know what? Hopefully they germinate and I have a good harvest. But if not, I will journal it like I have for the several years of my failures and add those to the list and keep growing next year. Okay, so I just had a lovely visit and some lunch with my grandson. I wanted to get him out here to play in the garden with me, but he had to go for a nap, so got a little late start. I have to head out to do a few errands. So I'm not going to get everything that I planned to get planted today done, but I'll take you along for what I can do. I'm going to do some kale, lettuces, onions, and some pretty flowers. So I've only got about an hour to get this done, so I need to get this started. So let's go.
I could buy a nice thing. When I found it, was as empty as could be, and now I'm staring at my face above a bathroom sink, saying I want peace. It's where I am now. It's the only thing I haven't found somehow. There are other places, there are a million pretty faces, but I want peace. It's where I am now. I used to worry about the future, but the future never came. Tried living in the past, but never did quite feel the same. I used to think that there was a place I would rather be, till I got there enough times to realize that you are only ever here. That's when I found peace with where I am now. It's the only place I'll ever be. I found that there are other places filled with a million pretty faces, but I found peace with where I am now. Through the ups and downs, I have figured out you find peace where you make it. The scenery won't change it. I wasted so much time thinking I could ever find enough of anything that would bring me peace. So I found peace with who I am now. It's the only me I'll ever be. I found there are other places, there are a million other faces, but I found peace with who I am now.
That is my plan. I will continue to grow food as long as I can. I will continue to learn as a gardener about myself and about different plants that I like to grow and things that I like to do in the garden. So until next time, guys, stay safe and keep living.